Hi there. I promised that I would make this video for you to talk through some things about the final project report that you'll be turning in by the end of this semester. The exact date is on your syllabus and has been since the beginning of the semester, so be sure that you refer to that. So if you go to Canvas and you scroll down, you'll see this final project module. You'll see I have inserted this final project instructions PDF. I'm going to be stepping you through that. That'll just make it very explicit what I expect on your final report. Beyond that, you can also take a look at some of these other resources that have been there all semester. One is Advice on Projects. That's a slide deck that will give you some information about some of the other resources that are in this module. There were 2 papers that are linked there. Those are published papers of applied machine learning. You can step through this PowerPoint file, and it shows you kind of how I would evaluate this work if these published papers were turned in as the report. And you'll see that even these published papers are not perfect. I'm critical of the published literature. And so these papers, while they weren't written for my class, they aren't perfect in terms of what I would expect from you. But what you'll see is how I highlighted some of these different aspects of work that you should be thinking about as you're finishing up your report. And so you can learn a little bit about some applications of applied machine learning while also thinking about how you're going to write up your own paper if you look at those papers and you step through this PowerPoint file. And as it comes to the end of the discussion about each of the 2 papers, you'll see smiley faces, neutral faces, and frowny faces that show kind of my overall evaluation of this work. And again, it's to give you a sense of how I would evaluate ways that work is presented in your final report. So I'm just flipping through this fast now. I'm not expecting that you're reading along on these slides as I'm clicking on them, because you can just download the slide deck from Canvas and go through it at your own pace. But I'm just kind of pointing you to parts of these slides. You'll see how it is that I'm stepping through the content of the papers, but I'm structuring that by these bullet points about what aspects you should include in your final report. Now, more important than this for thinking about what needs to be in your final report is that instructions document. And if you open up that PDF, you'll see at the top I first start with the things that have been on the syllabus about the final project since the beginning of the semester. But what's new is that I've included here a breakdown of point percentages for the different aspects of your final report that need to be included there. So first, you should include an introduction that explains what your prediction problem was. It should talk about where your data came from. It should cite 2 different, data comes next. This is more like how you picked your problem and why you thought it was interesting. You'll cite 2 different published papers that you found relevant about your project. We talked about that in class, so you should have already been reading some stuff a while back. So you just have to cite at least 2 things here. And if you don't cite at least 2 things, you won't get credit for this part of the project. Next, you're going to talk more in detail about your data, where it came from, and how you set it up for machine learning. That includes how you partitioned it into subsets. We've been talking about that all semester long. Also, how it is that you took the raw data and turned it into a tabular form you could use for machine learning, any kind of data cleansing that you had to do. And also, specifically, where did the class value come from? So how do you know that the thing that you're trying to predict is consistent across your data? Who put in those labels? Where did they come from? Then next, you're going to talk about your baseline experiment and an error analysis. And you should have already started doing error analyses very early in the semester when you turned in your proposal. Also, we did very formal error analyses for assignment 6 and the practical part of the first midterm, and then you had the opportunity to turn in 5 different error analyses for extra credit up through the last 5 weeks of the semester. So hopefully you can just take one of those error analyses that you turned in at the end of the semester for extra credit and clean it up for your report. If you didn't take advantage of that, you should know very well how to do an error analysis from having done assignment 6 and taken the practical part of the first midterm. So the instructions for what should be included and how it's going to be evaluated should be very clear to you by now because of all of the other exposure to this that you've had. Then you will also want to include a tuning experiment, and that will include your evaluation of whether it was worth tuning your model. And you do not have to do this as fully explicit and by hand the way you did in assignments 8 and 9 or on the practical part of the second midterm. Instead, you could use the CV parameter tuning extension, not really extension, but meta classifier in WECA. I will have discussed that by the time you are finishing up your report. And so you could use that shortcut if you want to. What you'll report here is how you set it up. So which parameters did you pick to tune? What were the options? What was picked? And was it worth it? And you should know how to report all those things. That's worth 25% of your grade, and then on the report, that is. Then for another 10%, you should take the tuned model if it was worth tuning, or just the untuned model if it was not worth tuning. In both cases, trained over your cross-validation set and then applied to your final test set. And you'll report the results of that experiment and talk about whether you observed a big drop in performance between cross-validation over your cross-validation set and test on your test set. And then for a final 5% of your grade, I will like to see just a few sentences about what specifically were your takeaways from the project. What did you learn? What surprised you? What would you do differently if you had time? Okay, so do be sure that you turn your project report in on time. If you don't, I can't guarantee that it will be graded in time for you to get a grade by the end of the semester. If you're graduating, that's particularly critical. You can't pass this class without turning in your report. If you are not graduating this semester and you will not be able to turn in a report, you can talk to me about taking an incomplete in this class. Then you can finish up the work after the semester and get the grade later. So good luck to you as you finish up your project report.